Intelligence and national security reporter Ken Dilanian, national political reporter for The Washington Post and moderator of PBS's Washington Week, Robert Costa, managing director of Hamilton Place Strategies and former press secretary for House Speaker John Boehner, Michael Steele, and White House reporter for the Associated Press, Catherine Lucy. Thank you all so much for being here. Michael, I apologize for cutting one of your many titles after a very long
We really needed to tighten that up last time. That's great.
Ken, I want to start with you because you've been breaking a lot of new ground here at NBC on the reporting here. What do we know about what is coming Monday, what isn't coming Monday? Is there anything over the last 24 hours that's changed dramatically from Friday night?
I don't think anything's changed dramatically, particularly today, Casey, but here's what we know. We have two sources at NBC News telling us that there is a sealed indictment in the Mueller investigation that will be made public tomorrow. Now, our sources don't know who the targets are, they don't know the charges, but we're told it could be more than one defendant in a single indictment. And of course, the speculation has centered on the two men who've been front and center in this investigation since the beginning, Paul Manafort and Michael Flynn.
Right.
Absolutely.
Okay. So one indictment, but potentially multiple targets. And you're saying that we will know something tomorrow, or are we all going to be sort of waiting around with bated breath?
Look, anything's
and not
possible.
Anything?
Anything, Mueller may decide that, to do a misdirection on us, right? But our sources over the weekend were telling us to expect something tomorrow, be at work tomorrow. And, normally in these cases, this is a white-collar case, right? Normally a defendant would be allowed to turn himself into the courthouse and make what's called an initial appearance before a federal magistrate. But there's a prosecutor named Andrew Weissman who works for Robert Mueller, and he is known as a hardball player. And after all, these are the people who searched Paul Manafort's house with a no-knock warrant, basically picked the lock on the door while he was sleeping.
Pretty in your face.
So it would not surprise me to see early morning arrests. We just don't know how tomorrow's going to play out.
Bob Costa, talk to me about what the White House is thinking. We obviously had that on-the-record comment from Ty Cobb, but how stressed out are they? Where is their stress level on 1 to 10 scale?
There's a lot of speculation going on inside of the Republican Party and inside of the West Wing, and what they're really curious about is whether it actually touches the Trump campaign, or are we looking at something that's about former Trump campaign personnel and their own activities?
Do they consider Manafort the Trump campaign, or would you put that underneath the category of Donald Trump sort of dismissing him as well? He worked on my campaign for a little while. We're not friends.
Well, Paul Manafort was the campaign chairman. He was the senior person in the campaign for a period of months. Though, again, hate to speculate, but a lot of talk in Washington among my sources is if Manafort is being targeted by the special counsel, is it for things he did before the Trump campaign or things he did while he was chairing the Trump campaign?
Yeah, Catherine Lucy, what's your sense on that? I mean, having covered
I think Bob is right that there's a lot of things they could be looking at if we are indeed talking about Manafort, and there are a lot of activities before he showed up on the Trump campaign. So that certainly provides the president and his allies potentially with a redirection to say, look, this guy, and we've heard the president kind of go down that road before with people say, oh, I wasn't, I didn't know them that well, or they weren't that big a part of the campaign.
So we all remember when he was the guy to go to.
Yeah, so that's certainly, again, we don't want to speculate too much. We will see if something comes tomorrow, and we'll see how the president reacts, because he tends to react in real time on social media. So it's certainly possible we'll hear from him.
As we've all learned the hard way. Michael Steele, what's your sense on where congressional Republicans are on this? I go back and forth between thinking they kind of want Mueller to find something and take care of this for them, but on the other hand, some are trying to protect the president.
No, I think this is going to be a big week for congressional Republicans. They're going to be focused on tax reform. Chairman Brady's mark is coming out middle of the week, so I think they're going to be practicing a very, very resolute hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil, and try and keep one foot in front of the other, doing the job that they were sent there to do.
I was amused by your Brendan Buck, who is now the spokesman for Speaker Ryan, a job similar to what you used to hold for John Boehner, joking that all Paul Ryan ever talks about when asked about anything is tax reform. Tax reform, tax reform, tax reform. Ken, what can we take away from discovering the targets of these first indictments? I mean, maybe it's a Manafort, maybe it's a Flynn, maybe it's somebody else, but what is the goal? Is the goal here, do we think, likely to be to get, nail those people, or is it to try to shake something else loose?
The legal analysts who look at the way Mueller has been conducting this investigation believe that he is conducting a classic sort of outside-in, looking at a conspiracy where you try to take the bit players, charge them, and flip them. So it wouldn't surprise me if actually that we had never heard the names of the people who are charged tomorrow, that it didn't even reach the Manafort and Flynn level. It's some secretary who's going to be accused of lying to the FBI, because that's how you do these prosecutions. You want lower level people to talk about what they know about what the higher level people have been doing.
And Ken, what role do you think the sort of focus on family members, Paul Flynn's son, people that are related to Paul Manafort, or excuse me, Michael Flynn's son, is that part of that same tactic?
Absolutely.
That you're talking about?
One way to get people to talk is to put pressure on their children. I mean, that's, that is sort of in many ways the ultimate motivator. And these again are hardball prosecutors. They are taking no prisoners. They brought Paul Manafort's lawyer to testify before the grand jury. They brought his spokesperson. So we're seeing tactics we don't often see in these white-collar cases.
After everybody.
One of the things about this whole episode and investigation that I feel like I have to remind myself as a reporter, but also remind some of our readers sometimes, is that a grand jury investigation is so tough to crack. It's really not, it's almost impossible for reporters to talk. You can't talk to jurors.
Really figure out what's
going on. Legally, you're not even supposed to talk to grand jurors. So how do you get around that? So even whatever happens tomorrow, if anything, we're going to have to still say that could be a sliver of what this entire investigation is, because this whole grand jury is a cloud that's hard to piece together what's happening.
We're peeling back just a little piece of it. We should note, it's important to note that Michael Flynn, Paul Manafort, Michael Cohen all say that they've done nothing wrong. Michael Steele, you were trying to jump in.
No, I was just going to say that's one of the reasons that I think the congressional investigations will continue. While some of those are closed door, that's a much more public venue and much more open venue to discuss some of these important issues.
I want to touch on something else, and I know, Ken, you've been reporting on this, but the puzzle pieces are coming together on who allegedly funded the research on then-candidate Trump that became the basis for the so-called Steele dossier, Steele with an E, not like our Michael Steele here. The conservative Washington Free Beacon confirming Friday they first hired the political research firm Fusion GPS to look into Trump's background. But earlier in the week, the Washington Post first reported that the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee started picking up the bill for Fusion's work after the primary ended, and the original Republican source had lost interest. The Clinton campaign has declined to comment on reports about this funding, and at least one Republican senator wants to know more from a top Clinton official and a top Democrat.
John Podesta, the Clinton campaign manager, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz came before the Senate Intelligence Committee and said, we don't know who paid for this. Well, that was before this Washington Post report. Sitting next to Podesta was the lawyer from the Clinton campaign who paid for the report. So these guys need to come back and sit down and tell the committee what's up.
They absolutely need to be recalled. It's difficult to imagine that a campaign chairman, that the head of the DNC would not know of an expenditure of this magnitude and significance, but perhaps there's something more going on here. But certainly it's worth additional questioning of those two witnesses.
And what about the Clinton campaign lawyer?
So credit where credit is due to the Washington Post for breaking a story that a lot of people had been working pretty hard to kind of get at. And I certainly have been hearing from a lot of my sources about the focus on the timeline of who paid for this. Ken, let's just start with the facts as we know them here. Why does who paid for it matter? Who knew what when as this unfolded?
Well, arguably, it doesn't matter. It matters to Republicans who are trying to make an issue out of this information because they think it's driving the Trump investigation, and it may not be. And I can talk about that in a second. But look, here's what we know. So the Washington Free Beacon hired this firm Fusion GPS, co-owned by a former Wall Street Journal reporter, but they insist that Christopher Steele, the British intelligence operative, was not working for Fusion GPS at that time. And I have confirmed through my own reporting that it's true that Fusion GPS only hired Steele after the Democrats started paying.
So that would be June or so of 2016.
Right. And arguably, if you want to look at it that way, the Democrats paid for this dossier where Steele went to his sources in Russia.
It started to get written in early July, is my understanding, and was completed by the end of July. The dossier.
It's a little muddled because Glenn Simpson is also a Russia expert, and he was doing research on Russia before that. But here's the bottom line: does this matter? I mean, politicians are shocked that opposition research is going on in presidential campaigns. The only thing different here is that we never had a presidential candidate with this kind of international financial entanglements, particularly with an adversary country. So
does it matter?
Yeah, it matters. And I think that the important thing that you see here is that Susan Collins, not exactly a fire-breathing partisan, is out there saying that we need to have these guys back and we need to get at the truth. So I think that suggests that this is not a purely partisan issue. This is not just a smokescreen to protect the Trump administration. There are serious questions here.
What do we know, Bob, about what Democrats did know or not know about this? Clearly, Mark Elias was aware of it, the lawyer. But I mean, if you have, I have trouble believing that John Podesta and Debbie Wasserman Schultz would knowingly mislead the Senate Intelligence Committee. So that sort of raises the question of negligence, no?
It raises many questions, including that. And what we're going to have to see is, does Senator Collins and do other senators speak up and try to bring some of these Democrats to Capitol Hill, as well as perhaps the Washington Free Beacon and different people who are funding that operation, because it is opposition research, and you're right. Opposition research happens with every campaign. At the same time, this has high stakes for foreign policy. Who was telling Christopher Steele this kind of information? Many of it sorted. What does this mean for our political system and the fragility of it? I think that's what legislators want to know.
But also, I think it's opposition research. It sort of brings up all these questions about how the sausage gets made, but at this moment in time provides a helpful way for the president to shift attention. So he has really tried to sort of redirect focus on Twitter in his comments about what the questions are here.
Because here's the other thing about this. This stuff was not made public during the campaign, except in a Mother Jones article a week before the election that very few people paid attention to. The second thing is, while the Republicans have been trying to suggest that this forms the basis of the FBI investigation, it doesn't. There's a lot of other intelligence that came from foreign governments that was fueling that FBI investigation. Yes, they were interested in what Steele had. Yes, they entered into an arrangement to pay him, although that fell through. But the FBI and the CIA and the intelligence community have a lot of information on their own without this dossier.
And some of the reporting around this also seems to suggest that the reason why Fusion GPS ended up doing a lot of this was because they found so many rich kind of veins to tap about the president's financial dealings.
Yeah, and I also think it would be a different thing if the Democratic National Committee had said months and months ago, oh yeah, it was opposition research. Of course, we were doing this. This is a natural thing to do in a campaign. Instead, whether it was ignorance or complicity, they lied very sanctimoniously over and over and over again about it.
I'm still curious who exactly was lying and who exactly was simply unaware, and if they were unaware, again,
why?
Whoops. Anyway, coming up.